In the 21st century, France is simply a country in Western Europe with no ambitions of a grand empire or aspirations towards conquest. However, 400 years ago, the French were a force to be feared as they sought global dominance. The Bourbon dynasty very nearly guaranteed French victory on this front, only to be defeated by the British. At its peak, the First French colonial empire spanned over 3.4 million square kilometres and included some of the most profitable establishments around the globe. France, despite starting almost a whole century later than the Spanish, Portuguese and British, were immensely successful in their first colonial efforts by extracting resources and raw commodities out of India, North America and the Caribbean. Prior to French colonial expansion, French explorer Jacques Cartier claimed Canada in the name of France in 1534. Despite the interest in the Americas, stark competition with Spain alongside internal turmoil in Europe hindered French endeavours. The 1605 founding of Port Royal in the colony of Acadia, modern-day Nova Scotia, is widely considered to be the beginning of the French colonial efforts. Compounding their power in North America, the 1608 establishment of Quebec rapidly developed into an extensive fur trading network and secured French control of the Canadian region. By winning the allegiance of the Native Americans, the French garnered influence across much of North America, boasting extensive trading ports and fortifications across the continent's system of rivers. Engaging in the trade of fur, fish, and other such commodities, France had the foundations of a powerful colony in North America. Restricting further growth and potential in North America was the French nobility's urge to focus on European endeavours rather than colonisation. As such, the economic growth and scale of French colonies lagged that of their English counterparts. This is evident in the 1750 population of New France only being composed of 80,000 inhabitants, relative to the 1.1 million inhabitants of New England. Despite the potential for New France, it was not the highest priority for the government or the nobility, and as such was stunted in growth. Unlike France, Spain was aggressive in their colonization efforts. In the 16th century, Columbus staked Spanish claim to the island of Hispaniola. On the eastern side, a Spanish colony for growing cash crops developed, leaving the western portion of the island largely dormant, except for the presence of pirates along the coast. The French were present in this western area from as early as 1624, but it wasn't until the French West Indies Company gained control in 1659 that the development really took off. In the 1697 Treaty of Ryswick, France's claim to the western portion of Hispaniola was formally recognised. This colony, named Saint-Domingue, became the crown jewel of France's colonial endeavours for its ludicrous profitability. Disease and genocide had already ravaged the native populations of the area, but upon French arrival, their perceived unsuitability for Christian lifestyle prompted further genocide, decimating the natives beyond repair. Because of this, the colonists sought alternative labour resources. By importing an estimated 800,000 people from Africa to use as slave labour, the colony of Saint-Domingue had seemingly unlimited labour capacity at no cost. Limitless labour combined with the broad stretches of arable land made the perfect conditions for plantations. Luxury products in high demand across Europe, such as coffee, sugar, indigo, and cotton, were able to be produced at unprecedented rates. As a result, more than 40% of Europe's sugar and over 60% of its coffee came from this one colony. France had struck gold in their colonial endeavours. Amongst all of this economic growth, sparked by colonisation, France and Britain were both eager to secure their dominance in the New World and ensure prosperity for their respective colonies. There had been a history of colonial conflict in the Americas for decades, ranging from small-scale assaults and raids to official wars such as the War of Austrian Succession, which lasted from 1744 to 1748. However, these had all been indecisive. Built-up tension and continued raids culminated into the global conflict of the 7 Years' War, lasting 7 years from 1756 to 1763. At first, the French, with assistance of Native American tribes, were effective in battle, defeating the British repetitively. However, victory was short-lived. Plagued by multiple fronts of battle in Europe and the sparsely populated New France, the British overcame the French, claiming victory in January of 1763. On February 10th, 1763, the Treaty of France was signed. The terms of this treaty certified the beginning of the end for the first colonial French Empire. As dictated in this document, France ceased all colonial efforts in North America east of the Mississippi River, and transferred colonies in India to the British. Further, they lost portions of its establishments in the Caribbean. The costs of this war put France a further 1.1 billion livres in debt. Despite these monumental losses for France, crumbling the colonial empire, the nobility were relieved to have retained control over Saint-Domingue and all the wealth that came with it. Unfortunately for France, control over Saint-Domingue was fleeting. Underpopulation was to prove an issue for this colony as well. Upon the eve of the French Revolution in 1789, the colony had 10,000 plantation owners and 30,000 common Europeans working as merchants and general service providers, alongside another 30,000 free people of colour. These groups were a minuscule minority compared to the approximately 500,000 slaves residing on just over 800 plantations. On August 26, 1789, the National Assembly published the Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizen. Despite the mantra of this decree being that all men are born free and remain equal in rights, the situation in Saint-Domingue remained the same as before, in which the life of slaves was dictated by a piece of royal legislation, the Code Noir, initially produced in 1685, detailing the position of slaves as possession. The arrival of 100,000 new slaves from Africa, in response to higher demand for luxury goods, resulted in reduced living conditions, as the same amount of resources had been reserved for the larger labour force. These diminishing living conditions, alongside government failure to honour the Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizen within the colony, sparked the outrage amongst the slave population. A group of slaves, 100,000 strong, inspired by political pamphlets and tales of the sans-culottes on the mainland, initiated their own rebellion on the 21st of August 1791. Led by the free person of colour, Toussaint L'Ouverture, they killed over 1,000 plantation owners, demonstrating the combined might of the incarcerated population. By 1792, the rebellion had engulfed an entire third of the colony, and production on the plantations had all but ceased, putting France's economy into freefall. Siding with the Spanish, Toussaint acted as a general, threatening complete invasion. This forced French official Commissioner Sonthonax to emancipate the slaves in August 1793. This decision, which had not been presented to the National Convention, was eventually ratified into law in February of 1794, abolishing slavery across all of the French Empire, prompting Toussaint to switch to French allegiance and rid Saint-Domingue of the Spanish. Unfortunately, slavery was reintroduced to France in 1802 as an attempt by Napoleon to repair the French economy. This sparked another massive slave revolt, in which French rule was expelled from Saint-Domingue, becoming the Republic of Haiti. The first French colonial empire had been demolished.